I previously made a video explaining all of the endings of Miss Lemons, which is directly tied to the story of Mr. Tomatoes. You can watch that video by clicking on the link above or in the description below if you haven't watched it already, as I won't go into too much depth about Miss Lemons anymore. We are initially introduced to a strange text-to-speech speaking humanoid fruit known as Mr. Tomatoes, who demands food constantly as if never getting full. The text-to-speech ability of this entity alongside the other entity we encounter, Miss Lemons, is later revealed to be due to their nature of existence, with both of them being digital beings, or in other words, programs which have high levels of intelligence much more than just AI. It's also soon revealed that these entities were once human, hence why they are so intelligent, but regardless, they act strange and have peculiar obsession with eating and examining. It's only shown to us much later that Mr. Tomatoes requires more food items, as each one of these food items are digital codes which enable him to become more powerful, which eventually leads to him escape his digital confines and enter the World Wide Web.
With this power, I can do whatever I want. I am a god now. Wait, why do I need this game when I can take control of the whole system? Any last words? Because this system no longer belongs to you, mortal. Goodbye.
On the other hand, Miss Lemons requires the protagonist to answer some basic academic questions, but due to making it unfair with several hurdles thrown at the protagonist, it proves to be anything but simple. Miss Lemons has several personas which are all hostile, wanting to see the protagonist suffer. We soon learn that Miss Lemons only examines the protagonist as she tries rigorously to find a suitable candidate to help her and Mr. Tomatoes break free from their digital shackles.
Hello there, and welcome to my class. It's a place where I test young minds like yours, and try to find out how smart people can actually be, and reward them, if they are worthy. So, let's find out how smart you really are. Let's get started.
Miss Lemons, in fact, is so desperate for freedom that she even is prepared to die than to be stuck in the digital realm with hostile personas who control her mind and body. Only through achieving all endings and aspects of the game, the protagonist uncovers the horrifying truth hiding beneath the surface of this edutainment game. If you have noticed the spelling problem in Mr. Tomatoes, well done. In fact, this hasn't been done unintentionally, as Mr. Tomatoes, being a program, has his name related to his nature, Mr. Tomato S, having the OS placed there sneakily. That's also true for Miss Lemon S. Mr. Tomatoes explains to the protagonist he's invited to the game to feed him as he's unable to do it himself, asking the protagonist for specific items of food at each round, with him spitting out the ones that he didn't request, filling up his anger level. If the protagonist reaches anger level 10, it triggers a new form of Mr. Tomatoes known as the Devourer, with the environment changing and human body parts replacing the food items. Another form of Mr. Tomatoes is the Soul Eater, who demands the protagonist's soul to remedy his hunger for lack of food items. But the question is, we know that Mr. Tomatoes eats the food items as digital codes to become more powerful. So does that mean the protagonist is also a digital program or being that can make Mr. Tomatoes more powerful? In a different ending, after feeding Mr. Tomatoes fully, the protagonist is told to never return. If the protagonist attempts to return again, a new form of Mr. Tomatoes reappears by the name of Calamity. Two different forms of Mr. Tomatoes can also be unlocked, one known as Glitch and another simply as Unknown. In the last video, I already went over all of Miss Lemon's endings and explained the encounters the protagonist will have with her. But as a summary, we encounter Miss Lemons in a classroom who examines our academic knowledge by asking questions in fields of mathematics, geometry, and other topics. Miss Lemons seems like a harmless entity despite her mean and upfront no-nonsense attitude, not shying away from bluntly calling the protagonist simply stupid. But unlike her nature, she has several personas who prove to be very hostile. Replaying the game and interacting with Miss Lemon's different forms, we get rewarded with different pieces of information, and finally the Sage's ability, which acts as an absolute pass to any place with secrets and information. This ability allows us to access the Ouroboros file, which entails confidential information about who both Mr. Tomatoes and Miss Lemons are, including who created this digital realm, alongside some hints to who the protagonist might be. Ouroboros goes back to ancient history, starting from ancient Egypt, influencing the Greek mythology and poetry as well. Ouroboros is of a snake that is eating its tail, creating some sort of a loop which can signify new beginnings, new life, or life going on, and just repetition. Being able to access Project Ouroboros, we learn about the creator of the digital realm, who Mr. Tomatoes and Miss Lemons are. Right off the bat, we meet a character who labels himself as the Vessel, an entity that was purely created by the creator of this project to inject consciousnesses of two individuals into. The Vessel explains how he was put into a cryosleep, or as he words it, a state of coma where he was kept alive, but his existence and human-like intelligence allowed the subjects or consciousnesses to have a form and presence in the digital world. It seems as if without the Vessel, the subjects would not be able to enter the digital realm. Therefore, for this to be possible, they needed a vessel which would host their presence, which could easily dwell within this world. Later in the files, we read the tireless efforts of this mysterious creator into bringing the vessel to life and activating him, on how many times the vessel was unstable. It took the creator 6 attempts to make a stable vessel who would survive and host entry of subjects. Several requirements needed to be met for the creation of the vessel to be classified as a success. The vessel had to have a stable condition, it had to be conscious, it had to survive, and it had to have a percentage of conflicting code generation of 50% or lower. We'll get back to the conflicting code generation later and what it means. The creator, using the first human subject, we puts him in cryosleep so he can transfer his mind into the vessel. It's said that the vessel had DNA just like humans, which means the creator wants to experiment to be able to bring a deceased person back to life by somehow extracting their mind. The creator sets the vessel limiter ratio to 30%, with the subject only having 70% control of their minds. After the vessel adapting to the subject, with the subject being woken up, he remembered all of his past memories, essentially making this a failed experiment. As the creator attempts to eliminate the subject, he notices that the subject has escaped the confines of the vessel, with its essence labeled as its core, escaping into the World Wide Web. We can assume the subject who escaped as Mr. Tomatoes, as in the entirety of the game, he commands the mysterious protagonist to feed it, which are generation codes, giving him more control of the vessel and his own mind, with an ending freeing him when the protagonist fails to delete him. In the secret files, we also learn about the subjects and who they once were. Mr. Tomatoes was once a man by the name of Sebastian Moriarty. He was born in Crushadia and grew up in a wealthy family. He was very smart as a child and showed interest in reading, which allowed him to graduate from a well-known academy and secure a career as a waiter in the most prestigious restaurant in the Crushadia. Sebastian's story is of a sad one, where he had his heart broken by a girl that he fell in love with and ended up wasting his life away. During the experiment that was carried on him, he had 70% control of his mind, and due to his narcissistic tendencies, he managed to take control of the encounter with the mysterious protagonist, creating an illusion that all the codes are food items in the kitchen which were fed to him, making him more powerful. This eventually helps him escape his confines and run into the World Wide Web. He adapts the environment of the vessel as a kitchen, adopting a round vegetable such as a tomato to simplify the structure of his insides and have a stable form. The diagram shows where his core, essentially his existence and consciousness, is stored in the vegetable form. Mr. Tomato can absorb the codes of the vessel but requires someone's help, therefore he tricks the protagonist, helping him. Mr. Tomato's first altered form is the Soul Eater form, which is triggered when the vessel code is destroyed or absorbed. This in the gameplay can be achieved by feeding Mr. Tomatoes the food items. This form has heightened senses which allows him to devour a particle of the user's personal ID. This explains how the protagonist is an unaware user who's playing the game who can fall for the entities and have his computer hacked or destroyed. But it still remains a mystery how the protagonist comes to encounter these entities, as they don't seem to be publicly accessible, and even with Miss Lemons, the protagonist seems to lose an eye and a hand. The next form of Mr. Tomatoes is the Devourer, which can be triggered by overabsorption of the type-conflicting vessel code. In the gameplay, this is when the protagonist feeds Mr. Tomatoes the wrong codes or items of food. The next form is known as Calamity, which is a corrupted form of Mr. Tomatoes. This form can be triggered by overabsorption of non-conflicting vessel codes. This in the game can be achieved after stabbing Mr. Tomatoes and returning to the game. Killing Mr. Tomatoes seems to merge him fully with the vessel, allowing him to fully control the system. This form is also seen when the protagonist fails to successfully delete Mr. Tomatoes. The next form is the Glitch, which is a near-death form of Mr. Tomatoes, which is remnants of Mr. Tomatoes visually seen as a glitch about to be globally deleted. This form in the game can be encountered when Mr. Tomatoes is being deleted. The final form of Mr. Tomatoes is his unknown form. This form seems to be a copy of the original generated due to parts of the core separating, with each copy thinking that they are the original. Now taking a look at Miss Lemon's forms, one major aspect is different, that Miss Lemons has independent personas who act on their own and are completely different with different personalities compared to Mr. Tomatoes. Miss Lemons is a digital reincarnation of a test subject by the name of Louise Crimson. Louise was born in Louville and grew up in Crusadia similarly to Sebastian. From childhood, she was interested in science and eventually became an elementary school teacher. Interestingly, Louise starts working for the creator of the project way before he created the project and seemingly became evil. But after some time, for personal reasons, she leaves, instead becoming a teacher. Meanwhile, she gets acquainted with Sebastian, but after some time, Sebastian seems to fall in love with her having no feelings for him, which leaves Sebastian distraught and heartbroken, which makes him drink his days away in a local bar. Louise, being the second test subject, adapts the vessel to a classroom, an environment that she is used to, but instead of having 70% control over the vessel, she seems to only get 30%, so the same mistake wouldn't be repeated, with her regaining her memories. Louise, also due to having a vast amount of knowledge, loses control, with her brain beginning to get segmented, which leads to the creation of the several personas. Miss Lemons, just like Mr. Tomatoes, has a simple form for the stability of her internal structure. Unlike Mr. Tomatoes, however, she is unable to devour the vessel code and interfere with it, due to having only 30% control. This is why she heavily depends on the protagonist to figure the story out and free her by breaking the vessel free.
Well, I guess it's time for me to go. There are still a lot of people in the world whose abilities and knowledge I want to test. You did a great job. I hope we will meet again. Goodbye.
Miss Lemon's personas are known as Lamia, Lorelei, Lakshya, and Lilith, with each having a specific power. Lamia can be triggered if Miss Lemons reaches anger level 10. It has an uncanny form, loving to see her subjects get tortured and bleed, hence why she creates the unfair game of rock, paper, scissors to make the protagonist bleed. Lorelei has an invincible body and has the ability to control the timeline. This form can be encountered if the protagonist uses the artifact skull and stabs her, which causes her to shift the reality to heal. Lakshya, on the other hand, appears when she is bored with the protagonist. This in the game can happen when the protagonist makes some mistakes in answering the questions. Lakshya plays a dangerous game with the protagonist, throwing knives and chainsaws at him. The final form is Lilith, a devoid of emotion entity which appears if Mr. Tomato dies. This entity takes control of the main body and adapts the vessel into an absolute void, taking joy and solace in it. It's a possibility that all these personas are, in a way, related to the subject, but all being negative emotions, which have been triggered by her subconscious of being used as a test subject against her will. Now let's take a look at the main backstory and why the creator turned so evil to carry out such cruel experiments on Sebastian and Louise. The creator of the project gets to meet Sebastian when he visits a bar a few times. It turns out Sebastian loves a girl who doesn't have any feelings for him, which has led to him going to a bar and drinking every time to the point of getting drunk. The creator soon reveals that he had a wife by the name of Maureen, whom he loves very much. One day, Maureen gets sick, which makes the creator go to a pharmacy to get some meds for her. The same bar Sebastian is usually in happens to be next to the pharmacy, which makes the creator visit it to see if Sebastian is there. That's when they get talking, and Sebastian mentions he's a waiter in a prestigious restaurant where he has so many responsibilities, being more of a high-regarded butler than just a simple, ordinary waiter. As time passes, Maureen doesn't seem to get any better, which makes it a short-lived routine for the creator to go to the pharmacy to get some repeat medication and visit the bar to talk to Sebastian. Maureen's condition gradually becomes worse, which makes the creator, who happens to be a scientist, start work on developing a cure for his wife's condition, which seems to be terminal, especially as the current treatments don't seem to work. Occasionally on the weekends, the scientist goes to the bar to talk to Sebastian when he learns that the girl that he has feelings for is an elementary school teacher by the name of Louise, being the same woman who used to be the scientist's assistant before. After some time, the development of the new cure progressing very well, the scientist decides to go to the capital to test the cure and get it approved. On his way, he visits Sebastian, whom he feels to be good friends with now. After spending some time in the capital, the cure seems to be a success, with it getting approved, with the scientist overjoyed that his love of life, Maureen, can be healthy again. Being extremely happy, going back home the next day, he comes to the shocking scene that Maureen has passed away, all alone, with the condition getting the better of her, which makes the scientist fall to his knees in disbelief that all of this was in vain, and worst of all, that he was so close to make his wife healthy again. Resentful and lost, the scientist refuses to give up, even though his wife is long gone. He proceeds to preserve the body of his wife, not accepting her death, going to the bar the next day, luring Sebastian into his lab by asking him to help him with a science project. With the scientist rationalizing in his mind what he's about to do is for his wife, and that Sebastian, as a good friend, would surely forgive him. A few days after, with Sebastian being reported as lost with an investigation looking for him, the scientist visits the school Louise works in, luring her into his lab, saying that he has information about Sebastian's disappearance. Louise, actually caring about Sebastian, goes to his lab just to be confronted with the horrifying scene of Sebastian in a cryosleep and the preserved deceased body of the scientist's wife, Maureen, before she also loses her consciousness going into a cryosleep. The scientist in an eerie tone speaks under his breath that everything will be okay now, promising his dead wife that she will come back to life. So of course this suggests how the scientist did all of this to bring Maureen back to life. He created a vessel which houses consciousnesses. He subsequently transferred the minds of Sebastian and Louise into the vessel to test out how this would work. Louise turns into Miss Lemons, adapting the vessel into a classroom, an environment that she's subconsciously familiar with, while Sebastian turns into Mr. Tomatoes, turning the vessel into a restaurant. Both tests turn out to be unsuccessful, as both Mr. Tomatoes and Miss Lemons are unstable, being out of control, which leads to a third test subject which currently is inaccessible, with a third installment possibly revealing who it will be. And that is it about this video, folks. What are your thoughts and opinions about the game story? Let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you folks for being here. It's been a pleasure having you. Until the next time, have a fantastic day.